Good morning and happy Friday to everyone. I'm Terrell Strayhorn, Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Virginia Union University. And I'm delighted that you've taken the time to join us this morning for the second Faculty Spotlight in our new series. This morning we have one of our newest faculty members, Dr. Shajuan Mason, Assistant Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice in the School of Arts and Sciences. In just a moment, I will read Dr. Mason's introduction and then welcome her to the virtual platform. We'll move through some questions. Before we get started though, just want to say good morning to everyone and then invite you to use the Q&A to say hello, good morning, shout out someone, let us know who's in the house, but also to raise any questions in advance that you may have for Dr. Mason. In just a moment, we will begin. Thank you. All right, without further ado, I'm going to get started. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to some, present to others, Dr. Shajuan Mason. Dr. Shajuan Mason joins Virginia Union in the School of Arts and Sciences as Assistant Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice. She is an attorney and counselor of law with litigation experience representing adults and children in felony and misdemeanor cases. She has served as guardian ad litem for children in legal matters. Mason is a sought-after motivational speaker and lecturer on the topics of juveniles in the legal system. She has also served as a criminal legal analyst on, listen to this, TV1's television series, Fatal Attraction, and an episode on ruthless rivalry. Dr. Mason earned her bachelor's in government at the University of Virginia, a master's in social work from Virginia Commonwealth University, and a Juris Doctorate, a JD in law from the University of Richmond School of Law. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shajuan Mason.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Mason.
Good morning, Dr. Strayhorn.
One moment, I'm not sure if I can hear you yet.
Okay.
Let's see. Say something else.
Good morning.
I cannot. And anyone on the tech team, can you hear her? If not, we'll keep. All right, try it one more time.
Can you hear me now?
There it is. Okay. Good morning. How are you?
Morning. I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the Faculty Spotlight. Glad to have you here at Virginia Union first. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your academic training and field of expertise?
Sure. As you mentioned, I went to the University of Virginia there, majored in government. From there, matriculated to the T.C. Williams School of Law at the University of Richmond and VCU, getting a master's of social work. And the heart and the essential of the bulk of my training centered around children and the legal system. I've always had a passion for working with children. And so a lot of my research and a lot of my involvement was about, what is it about children and the legal system? How are we treating children in the legal system? And the case and precedents for in domestic relations district courts, the case is in regult. And what that does, it sets the precedence for children in reference for the court being the sole purpose of rehabilitation, which is totally different for the adult courts, which focuses on punishment. And so it was interesting to me, if we have court for children whose focus is on rehabilitation, how can we just look at the child or the juvenile without addressing the child's environment? And so I spent a lot of time trying to help the courts understand the impact of not just focusing on the child's issues, but, look at the background. Is the mother, is there a mental health issue? Are there substance abuse issues? And that became a key component, especially dealing with the school systems, because you would have a child that's labeled as having a behavior problem, when in essence, this child could be 10 years old and care of his or her younger brother or sister and has a parent who has substance abuse and quite frequently is in and out of the home environment. And so when the child comes to school, the child may be perceived as having behavioral issues when in fact, there's something going on in the home that's triggering these type of behaviors. And so a lot of my attention and training consists of working with the family. How can we strengthen the family dynamic? And I must specify that family dynamic, that has different components in and of itself, the support system. And so really trying to focus on those areas. And when you think of court, my role, I've always considered it an honor to be able to have an impact on the lives of so many people, because so many decisions are made. And I try to make other attorneys aware that it's more than a case, that there are individuals that walk through those doors who are court seeking answers. And so it is our job, not just so much to focus on, doing what's best for our client, but it's particularly in the cases where I served as the guardian ad litem, what type of tools can we leave the doors? Our job is finished, but they have to keep on living. And so being able to, and this is where the Masters of Social Work really is helpful for me, being able to step aside as a litigator, but actually focusing on the best interests of the child. And so as I began to, study more about children, the cognitive developments, their behaviors, it's amazing how my focus somewhat changed as substance abuse became more of an issue. And so I spent a lot of time of trying to figure out the best programs for, the adults and even children. And the approach that I had to take there when you're dealing with the court system, when you're dealing with court, the judges, as fair as they want to be, there's a lack of understanding for some in reference to substance abuse. And so what I try my best to do is to show them that when you are approaching those type of cases, defendant in the seat, but that defendant is connected to, he or she is a mother or a father, a brother or a sister, a cousin or somebody that is connected to someone. And so the importance of thinking of alternative options versus always incarcerating the defendants, or, an option in reference to pretrial services to let them remain outside of the jail prior to their court date so that they can support their families. And so it's It's been interesting to see how a lot of my research has outplayed itself in court. But I would want to thank, from the feedback that I have received, that many families have been receptive. A lot of the judges, knowing that I have that social work background in conjunction with my legal experience, tend to listen when I speak, and I never take that for granted and always appreciate that. But it's just so much bigger than what the law is. We have to treat individuals where they are. And sometimes the court systems are resistant to that because they have to do a job. And so I really try to make everyone aware, if it's the Commonwealth's attorney, probation officer, a counselor, whomever is involved in that particular case, that is more than just this person created an offense. And the case that really comes to me, Dr. Strayhorn, as I think about it, a young lady who graduated from high school as the valedictorian, and on the day of her graduation, she became homeless. And so you have to ask yourself, why is a valedictorian of a high school homeless the same day? Can you imagine, graduating, you're the valedictorian, and that day you're homeless, you're kicked out of your home. And so unfortunately, as a result of being homeless, life happened. I end up representing her, as a client. But her case is not something that is unique. You have several children young adults who have been released from foster care, and they found themselves without a support system. And so they will steal, but toiletries, items that are of necessity from Walmart, items that probably, would even cost maybe $10 or $20. But unfortunately, the way the law is, if you have, 2 or more prior felonies, you can larcenies, can be a felony. So you have a lot of young adults who have felonies when, in essence, if they would have had a more supportive family system or a supportive system, they wouldn't be in their type of predicament. And so really advocating for the vulnerable, advocating for the weak has been something that, I really try to stand up and try to do my best to help them and to make the court aware. The awareness, I will say, has been appreciated. I know since, I would say maybe 2 years, the court has administrated, I'm referencing the General District Court in Chesterfield. We had a clinician that was there to help assist the judges and to help assist the attorneys to have that awareness. And I'll be honest with you, if I didn't have my social work background, I probably wouldn't have that type of awareness too. And so just really looking at the impact of the environment and treating the individuals that interconnect us to someone when you're dealing with persons, whether it's children in the law or adults in the court system. So just really bringing awareness and just trying to have a better and greater impact within the court system itself.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. I mean, we hear so much about, substance abuse and its impact or disproportionate impact on communities of color, certainly about, the contact with the criminal justice system and how that disproportionately impacts communities of color, people of color, young men of color. And so your work with supporting adults and children is so family centered. It makes sense about the integration of your legal training and your social work degree. Could you talk a little bit about, you've already hit on the cases, but especially how your experience and training really relates to your teaching and scholarship here at Virginia Union?
Oh, it's almost like a marriage. I had the experience on the legal side, and then the experience that I have as far as the social work training, and merge them. And I have the opportunity to help shape and mold these young minds of these bright students that we have here, at Virginia Union. And one thing that I really try to get our young folk to understand is the importance of critical analysis. Critical analysis is key, and when you have to think a certain way, the importance of dispelling your myths. When you have a lot of people, when you hear the word criminal, immediately, we may not want to admit to it, but immediately, we have an image. And one thing that I try to specify to my students, particularly with substance abuse, that is something, if you're sitting in the courtroom, there's no particular description. That can be someone that has a PhD, someone with a master, someone with a bachelor, someone that doesn't any type of diploma at all. It can affect or impact anyone. And so being able to dispel your own personal myths and looking deeper, and as you've indicated, there's a huge disparity within the criminal justice system for minorities, a huge disparity. And so looking at the different institutions and the roles that they play. Then when you look at some of our school systems, look at the different communities and how there's a lack of investment. And so, you know, children with idle time on their hands, without structure at home, are likely to find themselves in, you know, the system. And I can think about the cases that I've shared, some I've shared with my students, about the same children who were removed from an environment that wasn't structured to an environment that has a lot of structure, that is engaged in value education, and they thrive. They thrive. It's like they find the world that they're born into, and that is their norm. You know, other persons can't relate to that. And so having stability to some of these persons that I have represented, it's something foreign and something that they had to embrace. And there's a culture where you feel as if, well, I don't want to, you know, have my friends or those persons back home to think, you know, that I'm different or that I no longer identify with them. And so it's so many systems within, I always call sometimes the low income housing, the caste system, as being designed to keep you there versus giving you the necessary tools and resources so that you can become empowered. You know, strong individuals are part of strong families, which are part of strong communities. That's what, you know, I try to advocate, and that's what I try to help get my students to see when we analyze the material, that, you know, it's consider the lenses that you're looking from. And just because you see the law and you see the different defendants, there's a story behind every person. Figure out what brought them to him or her to this point, and what can be done differently. What can we learn from this within the communities? And a lot of time you'll find it's bigger than the individuals. There are a lot of factors in the communities. For instance, you know, if a person commits a felony at the age of 15, once they become an adult, that follows them. So you can be 40 years old, but still being punished for something that you did when you were 15. And that felony conviction is so serious because it impacts your ability for housing, your ability to attend certain schools or to be eligible for certain scholarships. And so that alone, if you think of a family system, that's use the analogy, if it's just a man I'm referring to. So automatically this husband has an element that is helping him to be negatively impacted from something that he did when he was 15. And that's something that, you know, he has to work harder, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs. And I've had cases where clients frankly said, you know, Attorney Mason, I'd just rather go back to jail. And that is sad. Wow. That is extremely sad. And so it's beyond the individuals. It is something, when you look in the communities, you have to ask yourself, why are these ABC stores, these credit places, why are they located strategically in certain communities? Why are the schools downtrodden? And I've been to certain IEP evaluations, and I will tell you, this is amazing to me. You can walk in a school that from low income persons, and in there you see things about financial aid, assistance. You see things that are designed to keep that community dependent. I can go to a school where they're more wealthy and they have more resources, and guess what you see in their office? Material about independence, scholarship, college, you know, different programs and internships. And so it's amazing how those things alone, though they may appear subtle, it impacts the minds and the ability of those to achieve higher and to achieve greater and to look beyond their community. And so it goes so much beyond the individuals. And that's what I try to emphasize to my class. But whenever you're dealing with any type of craft in the field. I'm a huge proponent of your self-awareness is key. Have which lens you're looking through to really be able to see the actual issue and the root cause of whatever the concern is at hand. Wow.
Yes, that's so important. And I'm glad to see so many people using the Q&A to say good morning. You got some welcomes, Dr. Mason, and looks like we got some folks from UVA and from University of Richmond. So that's exciting. We can keep the chat going, keep people joining us. We'll come to that in a moment. I do have a question that I know everyone wants to know, and then I have a follow-up for it, just so you are aware. But the first is, so you served as a criminal legal analyst for a TV show, Fatal Attraction. Can you tell us about that experience and how it connects to your expertise?
Well, it was one of those rare moments when Richmond was featured, and what the producers wanted, they wanted attorneys from the actual area. And, you know, and I really appreciate that, because being from the area, you know, my that part of Richmond that they featured, which was Blackwell, and then it was a part of Chesterfield. And so being a part of the area, you know, you're familiar with the culture there. You know, cultures vary from cities, from counties. And so the fact that they were intentional and looking for attorneys that were aware of the area, the culture, the community, that was something key, because I was able to give them information that was genuine and not so much scripted. And so the scenario that I was featured on, Ruthless Rivalry, it hit home for me, because I think you and I were at UVA at this time, Dr. Strayhorn, and you may remember, I had a cousin in 1995 that was murdered. And the impact of that on a family and dealing with that, that, you know, it was traumatic. And so, in being featured on that particular show, or that particular episode, rather, it really hit home for me, but I had to see it from a different lens. So the victimology theories that we deal with in criminology, you know, I had to step back and view it as a legal analyst. But, you know, I'm one person. And so that part of me that had the personal connection of having a loved one murdered, and, you know, because of a relationship. And that unfortunately, that happened to Khadijah, the young lady who was murdered in that episode. And so I had the ability to connect with that particular episode from my experience as an attorney, but also from the experience of a family member who lost a dear cousin. And as you saw, if I'm not sure if anyone watched it, you saw her mother, you saw her relatives, and that's what I always try to emphasize. It's so much more than just the individual, because when I think of my cousin who was murdered, I see how it impacted my aunt, my mother, my cousins, our entire family, his children, and how things could have been different had he been here. And when you think about Khadijah in that particular episode of Ruthless Rivalry, your heart just goes out to her. And it was because of relationship. The same thing with my cousin. And so it's just sad, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to share and to be able to give feedback from both sides.
That's so meaningful. Thanks for sharing that. And I remember that I was going to share that in this episode for folks who are watching. You know, this is our second time with our paths crossing. So Dr. Mason and I were at UVA together. We were both in Black Voices, the gospel choir. And so I remember you singing. And so it's just kind of a full circle moment to see you again now at Virginia Union on our faculty. I do have a question about that. So you're a professor, an attorney, a mom, you know, you've been on a TV episode. You just said earlier in this episode that your MSW, the Master in Social Work, is really helpful to you in your work. And now you are a divinity student at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. Tell us more about that decision.
You know, I found myself in a season where really evaluating always wanted to help others, always wanted to help others. And children have always been my passion. But, and I can only speak for me, there was a tugging and a calling that I could really feel over my life. I'm not fully certain of where, God is leading me, but I know that, I have a calling in the ministry. And so that is why I am enrolled at the greatest school of theology, the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. And so I find myself there, and it's amazing because I'm starting to see how my experience as an attorney, how my background in social work, I'm starting to see how it's all coming together. It helps me in dealing with people, seeing them for who they are, but more importantly, knowing and being aware, self-aware of myself and what I bring to the table. And so the whole process is an exciting journey. I'm just really excited to see where God is leading me, but I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. It's just as if I'm right where I'm supposed to be. The teacher is now the student and the teacher, but we know that we're always students. So it's a great, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I thank Jesus for that.
Well, let me tell you this, as your provost, I agree, you are right where you're supposed to be. Listening to you this morning talk about your scholarship, your teaching, your experience, and the synergies between both the victimology and the victimological theories, as well as criminology, the study of criminal behaviors, sort of layered with your commitment to social justice and sociology, its impact on communities of color and family. It squarely fits with the mission and vision here at Virginia Union. We're, all about training leaders of today and tomorrow who will go on to seize the promise of a limitless future. And we do that primarily through the teaching of our faculty and the preparation of students through our curriculum. So we need experts in their fields like yourself, who are really committed to not only good education, but doing good work. So we have received a question from the live audience, and then we'll wrap up here. And that is, do you have any thoughts about how we change the system that strategically impacts communities of color? How do we change the system that really causes these disparities amongst communities of color? Their comment is low income communities seem to suffer so much more, and it's really sad.
I have an interesting response to that. So at one point I was running for public office. I was running for the Board of Supervisors for Chesterfield County. And throughout that process, and I'll explain Chesterfield County. Chesterfield County is part of Virginia, for those who don't know, but the area that I was running for was Matoaka. Matoaka is the largest county within Chesterfield, but the most diverse. And as I was campaigning, I constantly said one size does not fit all. And the reason for that, there are your low income and most impoverished areas. And at the same time, on the other side, you have your lucrative, well-established areas full of resources. But one side, which was the low income area, constantly being ignored. And so running for office, I saw the role of legislation, the role of having persons in those because they're able to implement, change, implement revitalizing communities. And what I found was a lot of things are written down on paper, but they remained on the paper. I don't need, a revitalization plan to be on paper. I need some action. And every time it's being reviewed at 5 years, I don't need to see the same thing on there. If it's still there, then it means we haven't done anything. But the problem with that is a lot of the locals were not aware of that. And I'm going to say it straight out. A lot of old-fashioned gerrymandering was at that time going on. But it's being clothed and presented in a different manner, so you don't know. And so I'm appreciative for everyone who comes out for the presidential elections, but you have to show up for these local elections as well, because that is when your community is directly impacted. Because as I indicated, there's a within our criminal justice system. But if we are not able to go in there and to impact the environment, but also legislation, like I said, the felony conviction, that is huge. Why is someone who being, we've already served your time in your debt to society, so why are you still being punished? And that hinders you in the areas of employment, housing, just key components. And so when you have families that are stigmatized and that are held behind because of that felony conviction, it's hard. The children are in areas where, education isn't valued, or they're not getting the same level of education as the students who are attending the private school or even the public school, just because it's on the different side of the tracks. And so you have to look at it from a lot of different angles. So hopefully that helped.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mason. It's been great to have you this morning as our faculty spotlight. We welcome you again to Virginia Union. Look forward to all that you're going to do on our faculty. And to those of you who joined in this morning, thank you for your time and your attention. And this faculty spotlight, I know you were inspired and motivated by the insights shared by Professor Shajuan Mason, Assistant Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice in our School of Arts and Sciences. I certainly invite you to stay tuned for our next episode. Now, on next Friday, we will have Dr. George Ackerman, and then we have a whole lineup of our faculty for this semester enrolling into the spring. Also want to use this platform to invite you to follow up and look at our distinguished lecture series through the Center for the Study of HBCUs. We've got Michael Eric Dyson. Professor Michael Eric Dyson will be speaking, giving his lecture on this coming Wednesday, November 4th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Look for that information and the link. Most importantly, happy Friday. Wishing you all a very great weekend. Listen, wash your hands, wear your mask, stay 6 feet apart, vote. Go out and vote. Your life depends upon it. Take your flu shot. I know my mom is probably watching. She wants me to say that to you. Take your flu shot. Stay healthy. And we'll see you next week for another episode. Take care.